Now, Zack Polanski was interviewed by Novara Media at the Green Party conference, where he did not hold back on Nigel Farage, calling him a fascist.
I think in Nigel Farage we're dealing with a fascist, and as much as I will do anything, almost anything, to make sure we have an actual democracy in this country, I would say making a fascist the Prime Minister would seem counterproductive. In terms of a Labour coalition, it's something...
So you wouldn't support PR if it meant that made Nigel Farage Prime Minister?
No. I just think ultimately you have to have a red line. And although if you said to me what's the number one thing that I think would change the British political system, I would say it's PR. Now, before I get atted, I realise that that can seem privileged because people are really struggling with their wages, they're struggling with the cost of living crisis, they're struggling with fascism and racism. All of those things absolutely matter. But until we get proportional representation, I think it's very difficult to deal with those things meaningfully because we know we could get Farage being Prime Minister on 25 to 30% of the vote. Despite a majority not electing him, he could get a huge majority. I don't think that's going to happen, but that's a reasonable scenario.
I mean, I think the more controversial point here is that Zack has sort of made a red line for PR, saying he wouldn't support PR if it made Farage Prime Minister. Now, following on from this, Lewis Goodall at LBC tried to nail Zack on calling Farage a fascist.
You've described Nigel Farage as a fascist. Now, fascism, the last time I checked, involved ultra-authoritarian nationalism, the suppression of dissent, a single-party state, a cult of personality, and the use of violence or paramilitarism to achieve its end. Which of those criteria would you say Nigel Farage satisfies?
I think most of them are on the way if you actually listen to the things that he's saying. Also,
what, a single-party state? He's not proposed to abolish British democracy. That's absurd.
Well, he's not yet, but also during Brexit, when you think about take back control, some of the themes that were in there all seem to be speaking.
You think that Brexit was about the consolidation and the creation of a single-party state?
I think Brexit was ultimately about protecting the wealth of multimillionaires and billionaires.
Yeah, but that's different. No, you're changing the conversation there, Zack Polanski.
No,
I've just asked you about how you think Nigel Farage satisfies the criteria of fascism, one of which involves a pretty key one, the creation of a single-party state. What has Nigel Farage said or done which would indicate any legitimacy to the idea that he's in favour of a single-party state?
Well, I was about to finish with what I was saying, which is when you have excess power in this country and wealth, which often come together, when that utilises working class resentment, you don't have to be a historian to know there are many times in the history when that's exactly when fascism begins.
I think my favourite thing about mainstream media journalists is cutting people off and not allowing them to finish. Right? Maybe Luke Goodall should take some tips on that. Look, I don't know whether I would consider Farage a full-on fascist, right? I'm happy for my mind to be changed, by the way. I think there are absolutely fascists within reform. But I think what Lewis misses here is that fascists don't typically say they are fascists, okay? It's not likely a politician would claim to support a one-party state beforehand. But that is one of many points on fascism. Like, he stuck to that one point, but there's so many other factors to look at. Now, scholars don't always agree on the definition of fascism. Key points would include nationalism, being anti-democratic, support for one ethnic group over the other, and opposition to individual liberty. It can also mean corporatism, which Mussolini claimed to be, a state which is completely blended with corporations. Now, that is starting to happen already in my eyes. So, is there any evidence that points to Nigel Farage being a fascist? Well, for starters, when he was younger, many teachers described him to be so. Now, I'm going to read out a paragraph from that piece. A recently unearthed letter from the rabid right-winger's time at posh public school Dulwich College alleges that he marched through a quiet Sussex village very late at night shouting Hitler Youth songs. Written by Mr. Farage's former English teacher, Chloe Deakin, the letter was sent to the school's headmaster in response to Mr. Farage being made a prefect. Former Dulwich College teacher Bob Jope told Channel 4 News, to some extent, you might say the accusation from some staff was that Nigel had voiced views that were simply not right-wing, as nobody's going to object to a place on the spectrum, but views that were quite clearly racist. Now, is that enough? I mean, it's true that people say some really stupid stuff as a kid, so if that's the only evidence, I don't buy it. But there's more. This is a clip from a Farage profile created by Led by Donkeys.
April 1964. Nigel Farage is born in Farnborough, Kent. He attends private prep school before enrolling at the fee-paying Dulwich College at the age of 10. 1978. The 14-year-old Farage joins the Conservative Party after seeing Margaret Thatcher's radical free market mentor, Keith Joseph, speak at the school. 1981. An English teacher at Dulwich College writes that a colleague who teaches Farage, quote, described his publicly professed racist and neo-fascist views, while another colleague recounted that, at a combined cadet force camp organised by the college, Farage and others had marched through a quiet Sussex village very late at night, shouting Hitler Youth songs. One Jewish pupil will later recall how Farage would sidle up to him and say Hitler was right, and gas them. Fellow pupil Nick Gordon-Brown remembers he looked like a middle-aged man when he was a sixth former. He was a very vocal National Front supporter. There was a Jewish lad at school whom he was horrible to. With Jewish schoolmates, he made no secret of his distaste for them. What you see now is what he was like then. He meets Mark Devon, a former UKIP activist who is now head of research at the neo-Nazi BNP, and the editor of Mindbenders, a supposed exposé of Jews in the media. Farage is seeking compromising information on UKIP leader Alan Sked in an effort to oust him. A photo shows Farage and Devon at the meeting, along with Tony Leckermer, a BNP member who served 3 years in prison for handling explosives in an attempt to bomb a left-wing group. Leckermer was given another 3 years for stabbing a Jewish schoolteacher who had been trying to remove a BNP sticker on the underground.
It's not a pretty picture, is it? There's also the fact that he is friends and a supporter of Donald Trump, who is currently leading a fascist government in the US. He also said this in 2017.
Does that mean, Nigel, if we are Brexiting, that every civil servant, every ambassador, even head of the army or head of the navy, would they have to be replaced if they are remainders? Is that democracy, Nigel?
Well, absolutely. The job of the civil service is to do what the elected government of the day tells them to do. And I know this government doesn't really look like a Brexit government very often, but the fact is they were elected in 2017, Joko. Hang on. They were elected.
Okay, you're right.
They were elected on a manifesto to deliver Brexit, and if civil servants are seen to be an obstruction to that, then they should either change their ways or be removed. Absolutely.
I mean, I think whether Farage is a fascist or not, I don't think it's crazy or a crazy thing for Polanski to say that he is. I mean, the point is to not give cover to politicians. And given Farage's dodgy past, why should Lewis Goodall shut down this so quickly? I also think there's a difference between an individual fascist and someone ushering a fascist state. Look, calling for mass deportations, that is a key policy of fascist governments. Controlling immigration, I think, is not racist or fascist, but being ideologically wedded to mass deportations for no logical or economic reason is different, and that is the current position of the Reform Party. Megan, Zack hasn't made a misstep since being elected to leader, but given how the entire media will push back on him, and most people certainly don't think Farage is a fascist, is this a tactical error that could backfire on Zack?
I think it could, only because, as I said before, people are throwing around fascist and communists and socialists, and they're starting to lose its meaning. And there's this huge push by the far right to propagandize fascism in itself, and you know, they're trying to push away from the fascist movement by claiming that fascism is left. So it's I think by using fascist, I've talked to a lot of reform and conservative voters who don't believe Farage is a fascist at all. But as soon as I use the word fascist, it's almost like the arguments, the conversation's done, because they have no interest in communicating any further, because they hear fascist and they tune out. So I think at this point, because it's been utilized so much, it's almost like it's exhausted itself, so I do think it could, there are a lot of reform supporters, I do think, that could be keen on green policies, if they were to, listen to what we had to say. And they're not going to listen if we just keep saying fascist.
What are your thoughts on Zack saying that he would ditch proportional representation if it made a reform government more likely? Was that a mistake to say?
I don't. I think at the moment, Farage is the biggest threat to the UK, hands down. He's the biggest threat. So I don't think that was a mistake for him to make. And I mean, I personally do believe that Farage is a fascist. I just think when appealing for support, it might hinder him by using that word. I mean, there are other ways to go around the conversation without using fascist, but I personally think he is the dehumanization of migrants. A key element of fascism is um, using a scapegoat as a common enemy, to gain support, and he's doing that. He's using Trump's playbook. He's just a few years behind. And I'm an immigrant. I see it all the time, and it's been happening since I even moved here 8 years ago. And it's just he's been instilling this fear of immigrants for years, and it's a slow process. Fascism doesn't happen overnight. It's a slow process, and I think I do agree with Zach that he hasn't, maybe there are certain elements of fascism that he hasn't expressed yet, but if he's following Trump's playbook, and I do believe he is, that's just going to come with the course.